Welcome to the Certificate in Basic Animal Care Science. I'm Liv, and let's see what's coming up in this week's show.
This week we're hanging out with the cute and fuzzy critters at Orana. The spider monkeys swing into the spotlight. Graham explains how these wee fuzzies work. And the porcupine teaches us all about defence mechanisms. But first, we discover a bit about the acrobatic otter.
We've come to the otters, and while they're doing their thing and having a bit of a feed, the meerkats come from the mongoose family. Now the otters, I've got to say, they look kind of like a ferret crossed with a seal. What are they related to?
Probably best described as an aquatic ferret. The same family, mustard family, all your stoats, your ferrets, your weasels, that particular group. The ones we keep and actively breed here in Australasia are the Asiatic small-clawed otters. And what you see in the exhibit behind us are 5 brothers born in 2 different litters in the same year. So 2 were born in January and 3 were born in December.
They're comical to watch. They all seem to go like a pack of sheep, but sort of acrobatic sheep. How is their structure?
That is the unique thing with the Asiatic small-claws. All otters can be best described as solitary animals living in pairs. So you've got a breeding pair that'll come together, raise a litter. Once the litter have got to a certain age, they'll naturally disperse, the parents will move off. Asiatic small claws are very unique, where last year's litter will assist mum and dad to raise this year's litter. Then once this year's litter become active and start feeding themselves, last year's litter will move off and do their own thing. So they're quite easily kept in captivity in social groups like you see behind us.
Okay, so they are sort of amphibious creatures, I suppose, being living in the water and on the land. What physically allows them to be so transitional?
The unique thing with the Asiatic small claw, they're actually more terrestrial than aquatic. They spend a lot more time on land, so beetles, bugs, worms, that sort of thing also makes up their diets. Whereas, for instance, the sea otters from off the coast of the United States, totally aquatic. Basically only come to land to give to birth, and that's it.
And what on the actual otter themselves, what aids them in the water?
Very thick, broad tail, great little rudder, good for turning that. Partially webbed feet, they aren't fully webbed at all. An animal which, these ones can hold their breath up to 4 minutes. So they tend to live in estuaries and river systems, so they need to be able to hunt for small crustaceans and fish and crabs and things like that. The
breeding programs for otters, is this a breed and release program or a breed for captivity program that you have with these otters?
It's Australasia, the Erasmus group, are working on keeping a good, strong, healthy backup population for release back into the wild one day when we have a clean environment to release them to. We're having a lot of problems with pollution in their natural environment, particularly with heavy metals. Being top of the food chain, a lot of pollution goes through and ends up inside the otter and stays there. So we're having major issues with basically cleaning up their environment before we can release. That's with the Asiatic small claws. With other species that have been held throughout the world, particularly in Europe, the numbers are starting to slowly come back now to great advocacy and breeding programs.
The breeding process for an otter, is it hard to get them in the mood?
What would happen in a captive environment is you would get a pair allocated to you by your stud book or species coordinator. They would be given their own facilities. After a small amount of introduction time between wire or separate enclosures, once they're found compatible, Mother Nature does 99% of the work. We sit back and watch and monitor.
Contraceptive devices for the exotic side of the animals, how do you guys know when they're in season for starters, and then what do you do to make sure that you're not breeding at the wrong times?
The best way to stop any breeding is separation, and if we can't do that, we have contraceptive implants that we can use as well too. So it's a small rice-like device which is injected underneath the skin, and it slowly secretes too many hormones, and it basically upsets the reproductive process. And that can be used from giraffe to otters to meerkats, all sorts that we can use it on. And really observation, spending time with your animals, knowing your animals. Certain species, wild dogs for instance, they come into season twice a year. So you know every 6 months you're going to have that problem, so you can observe behaviour, watching your males, watching your females, and you can, if you spot it early, you can definitely separate or put into your contraceptive
And the poles, I mean, sitting on the post, they look like they're having a lot of fun there. What other enrichment exercises do you do with the likes of the otters or the meerkats?
A lot of it, particularly with these animals, olfactory, so we can change scents. We use perfume. A lot of our volunteers bring in empty perfume bottles that we can actually dilute, and we can spray that around their exhibits, and that's changed the environment and encourage them to go and re-scent their environment as well. The posts there are really more for us as a mechanism so that we know where they are, we can get up close enough to them. And with otters, they recommend when you're renovating an exhibit that you only do 1/3 to 1/4 at a time. You do not remove their whole exhibit and then one day they come back and find a totally different exhibit. You can increase your stress levels and then you could possibly get some fighting issues in amongst them as well.
My interest in Orana Park started when I travelled to New Zealand, and I started as a volunteer here, and I started as a walkabout guide. So I got to know all the animals through all the public talks, started doing some work experience here, and then was lucky enough to get a job. Before coming to New Zealand, I worked for a conservation charity in the UK, and that was for birds. So I was surveying birds for habitat management and things like that. And I also did a zoology degree at Glasgow University, so that's where my interest in animals really came from. Well, when I first started here at the park, I was actually essentially a swing keeper, which means that I was lucky enough to work on the 3 exotic sections we have, so that's ungulates, carnivores and primates. So yes, one person left and the position that came up was primates, and I was asked if I wanted to do it, and that's essentially how it came about. Well, we do lots of enrichment for the spider monkeys. Obviously, being primates, they're very intelligent and they can actually get bored quite easily. So we do lots of enrichment for the spider monkeys, and this is actually part of the enrichment. It means they have to work a little bit harder for their food. And another idea behind the box was actually to keep the ducks away. So the spider monkeys actually got all the food that we put out for them. So that was the idea behind the box. We would like to eventually put some more boxes on the island. Once again, because there's only one, Benito sits on top of it and tends to dominate it. So we are in the process of building some more boxes so the rest of the spider monkeys can get them. What we normally do is to keep their interest going and so that they're not bored, we change a lot of the ropes round about. We try to mimic what it would be like going through a rainforest, so obviously they're not in the same place all the time. So we change the ropes round about, we cut branches off trees, some of their favourite leaves to eat. We hang it inside and we also hang it on the island as well. And we do lots of scatter feeds with large pieces of fruit and also small items like nuts and seeds as well. Yeah, well the moats around these islands are a really good natural barrier. Obviously spider monkeys can't swim. They wouldn't come across water like this in their natural environment. So essentially they don't know how to swim. They do actually drink from the moat as well, but we have a fresh supply of water in the house for them every day as well. If we discover that a spider monkey is perhaps got a wound or is unwell, then we ID the monkey, and if necessary we take them all into the house and we would separate that monkey into the vet room, which is actually inside the house, and take it from there really. We would contact the vet, ask them to come and look at the monkey and determine from there what the problem is. Spider monkeys generally turn up with lots of different wounds all the time. They're usually just surface wounds, and our course of action for that would be essentially just to monitor the animal. Spider monkeys generally take care of all their own wounds like that, and we just monitor. We don't actually have a breeding program here at the moment. Our breeding male, Carlos, he died 3 years ago just after little Cara was born. All our other males on the island have been fixed, so we don't actually have a breeding program. 16 is a very good number to work with considering the space that we have. Yeah.
A meerkat, Siracuta, an animal which is in the mongoose family, only found in Central Africa, not found in Southern Africa. A desert species, basically feeds on anything that moves. So they are an animal with a mouthful of extremely razor-sharp teeth. So they'll eat anything, basically a lot of spiders and scorpions in their natural environment. Not having those here at the park or here in New Zealand, we have to find other things to feed them. So they are omnivorous, they all eat fruit, vegetables, but not a great deal of them, but they prefer bug larvae that we feed them here. And most evenings, just before bed, they'll either get a mouse or a chicken to chew on.
You say they feed on scorpion in the wild. Now, scorpion are notoriously renowned for their nasty sting. How do they get around that?
They're very, very fast. Yeah, faster than a scorpion. And they actually eat the sting off the end of the scorpion. It doesn't seem to affect them at all. So inside the stomach, very strong set of stomach acids, and they can deal with the poisons, not a problem at all, but very, very quick when they're coming across something like that.
And are there any health issues surrounding an animal like the meerkat in captivity?
Biggest health issue we possibly have is toxoplasmosis. This is an issue that we've dealt with here. We used to have sand in our exhibit, a great place for cats to come and defecate and urinate, so we've replaced the sand and put stones in there, and we really haven't had that much of an issue with them now. But management of meerkats really comes down to they're a highly sociable animal, best described a bunch of boys living together with an adult female, which is the alpha female does the breeding, and possibly injuries that they give to each other during fighting would be the biggest issue that we've ever had to deal with.
Now, programs like Meerkat Manor have been great for the advocacy of the meerkat. How have you found that reflecting in the curiosity or the popularity of the meerkats with tourists?
With the visitors that come into the park, the great thing about meerkats is they're very, very active. They're an animal which is constantly searching for food, so they're always doing something. You've always got an animal on sentry duty, usually up high, keeping an eye out for any predatory animals, particularly large birds are their biggest issue. Living on the flight path to the airport here, when they first arrived, big shadows of planes going over the exhibit would scare the group inside. We do have a population of harriers here at the park, which quite often keeps them a little bit more alert. But they're small, they're cute, cuddly to look at, and very active.
The meerkat have quite an interesting way of dealing with themselves in their little pack. Tell me about the structure of the way that they run their lives.
Generally it's an alpha male or an alpha female which actually dominate the group. Rest make up the numbers, because the more you are, the more eyes you have, the better they can good for searching for predators, and generally looking for food as well too. In a wild situation you would have a group of meerkats living together which would have a territory, and they would patrol that territory and they'd have to keep the neighbours out of it. So the bigger your group, the better the chance of you looking after your territory.
How has the habitat been created here to sort of stimulate that kind of nature?
Giving them the rotten logs. Our hoo-hoo grub here in New Zealand is a favourite food for them. So we have what we call a bug farm here, where we chop down a few trees every year and leave them to rot and allow the bugs to infest them, so that we can bring them up here and let the meerkats dig around through them, give them something to do, which is an activity or enrichment feed. The stones is something that we use as well too. We quite often will put beetle larvae in amongst the stones, which will encourage them to dig. And the enclosure itself, we've planted grasses in the back of it that allows invertebrate life to move in there and live around there. The logs that are in there, all that. So it's providing a habitat for their prey to live in.
And the rocks behind us, I mean, this is amazing, but I've heard rumours that they're not all real rocks.
No.
How have they been designed?
It's basically a steel frame covered with chicken mesh and concrete poured over the top of it. So basically they're all hollow. The back of the house, you can see 3 tubes sticking out of the exhibit. That goes into a box area at the back, which is fairly substantial so that they can't jump out of it. It's about 4 foot high. And inside that box there are 3 different compartments. One has a heat pad in it, one has a box inside a box, and then the end one, which is generally the entry box, is basically their toilet. So they don't have to go outside in bad weather if they don't want to.
Conditioning work for a meerkat.
Weight is a big problem that we have with our meerkats, so getting them to sit on scales is a way of us controlling them because they're quite lethargic. They can get very fat in captivity, not doing a great deal of exercise, as well as their claws are constantly growing, so we need to monitor them because they're not constantly digging in sand like they would in their normal environment. They can get excessively long. So we're going to embark on the next few months on trying to get our animals to willingly put their claws into a device that allows us to trim it without having to scruff or grab them to do that. So just basically eliminating the stress.
Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to Orana Park. My name's Amy. I'm one of the primate keepers here. The animals that we have here on our island are the black and white ruffed lemurs. These guys originate from Madagascar, and those of you who've watched the film will know. They spend the majority of their time up in the forests, foraging for the leaves and the fruit. Unlike the spider monkeys behind me, they don't use their tail as a prehensile limb. They actually use it for communication, but they do have a good way of getting food that's just out of reach. I'll try and show you that now, see if these guys will do that. Come on then. Good guys. So what the black and white ruffs do when they're feeding is they will hang upside down, and they're really quite clever animals because they can chew and swallow while they're hanging there feeding and collect as much food as they possibly can. Again, those of you who've seen the film will know that these lemurs do have a predator, and that's the fossa. And these posts have been put here at a specific distance, they're about 3 to 4 metres apart, and that shows you that these lemurs are capable of jumping quite large distances to escape their predators. The group that we have here is a family group. It's a mum, dad and 3 children, and it's about the same size that it would be in the wild. So they do quite well. The black and white ruffed lemurs are here for a reason. They're here because they are endangered. Their forest is being destroyed, so that's something that at Orana Park we're trying to combat. What you as New Zealanders can do is you can, when you're buying your furniture or your wooden ornaments, is to check that it has a sustainable sticker or a stamp underneath, and that shows that the wood has come from a sustainable source. In the wild, the diet will consist of foliage and local fruits. Here we feed the ring-tailed lemurs 3 times a day, and their diet consists of a primate biscuit, which is cereal-based, as well as fruits and vegetables. And we give them bananas as a special treat, which they really enjoy. The enrichment for these lemurs, we have different types of enrichment. At the moment in the front house we have different branches of browse that we use to try and make things a bit more natural for them in there, which they then play on. We also use pine cones where we fill them with banana and peanut butter, and it takes them quite a while to then feed and it's another play toy really. So yeah, it's just like any primate, they're very intelligent and it's coming up with different puzzles and things for them to play with, as well as changing the environment around for them quite often as well. They are on the endangered species list. In Madagascar, their habitat is being destroyed. So that's the main reason, as they're here to educate people about that plight, about deforestation. And the conservation outside Orana is simply to make sure that the public leave here with the knowledge of good conservation issues that are around the world, and that actually as locals and all visitors they can achieve something to help really. As long as that's done, then we've achieved something, which is good. We have here just females, so breeding is not happening here at the moment, but you can imagine a group of females together when they come in season. They do get aggressive, which is why we have 2 troops, and the 2 troops are split up simply to keep the aggression down. It would be the top female lemur that would be mating, so it really is whoever is the top male as well would then be in with the chance. So yeah, it all's to do with rank with lemurs. Lemurs have a good way of communicating alarm to each other within the troops. They have different alarm calls that they can use for aerial predators and land predators. We actually see it in the park sometimes when we see birds of prey flying over. They will all be in the trees looking up and alarm calling for each other, so it's a way that they all protect the troop really. The point of the fluff is, well, you have 2 reasons. The fluff's totally different to what you would have on a polar bear. It's only a 1-layered fluff and it does stand straight up, so it's actually penetrating heat away, and you've also got the different colours of the blacks and whites that help to project the light of the sun away from them. And basically these guys, they can project their fur upwards as an aggression mechanism to make them look bigger, which is something that can be done for scaring away potential people or animals that want to climb the ranks. The lemur's tails, particularly the ringtails, is used for communication. They use scent glands that they have on their arms and underarms, and they'll use it to wipe the scent on the tail, and it's called scent flicking, and they'll use the tail to flick the scent around just to mark the area that they're in and what kind of mood the guys are in. So yes, really is used solely for communication. This climate's not their normal climate that they have in Madagascar, so we have the huts here simply for them to have shelter. It's heated in there, so it's for warmth as well, so they can get away from the cold climate really. And everything else that's around is for our access, and we do try and make it as natural as possible. But basically, animal husbandry, we have to get in there, so yeah.
Okay, I want to talk briefly about the porcupine. Tell me about why they're here.
African crested porcupines are a species that we have chosen in Australasia to breed and keep in captivity. They are an animal which is now on the threatened species list because of habitat loss. They are also classified as a delicacy in certain parts of Africa because of human consumption. Second biggest rodent on the planet. An animal which is fairly easily kept and bred in captivity. We've been lucky enough here at Orana the last season to get 2 young ones born. So we have basically now produced what we would call a breeding centre for our porcupines, where the male and female are off exhibit. They're left to do their own thing so that they can reproduce and hopefully bring up some more for our program here in Australasia.
Why don't you want to get too close to one of them?
Two reasons. The spines, of course, because they can very well protect themselves. Their main protection is their quills. They tend to raise them all over their body, and if you get too close they'll just charge backwards and impale you on them. They are razor sharp, and porcupines are very, very bad housekeepers. So the ends of those quills get quite dirty and filthy. So if you do get one in underneath the skin, or a lion gets one into his foot, you usually get an infection because of it. The other reason is because they are a rodent. They have 2 very sharp incisors on the top and bottom of their jaw, and they can take a nasty piece of meat out of you very, very quickly.
And are they carnivorous or omnivorous as well?
Porcupines were, and they still do, we do it here at the park for them for enrichment as well as for teeth management. We give them bones. So sometimes we find chalky bones that have been lying out in the sun that are getting quite soft, which they quite enjoy, but quite often we'll give a fresh bone which has been had all the meat carved off it, and they really like to chew on that as well too. So whether they actually eat meat, they don't actively run down something and catch it, but if they were to come across a carcass, that they may stand there and chew a little bit of tissue off it.
And there's another reason that the porcupine have the spines as well. It's quite an audible thing, isn't it?
The tail in particular. They have 6 or 7 hollow quills on the end of that tail, and they rattle it and it makes a noise, so it makes them sound bigger and nastier than what they really are. And most predators understand once they've had their first encounter with the porcupine not to go back again.
And the meerkat and the porcupine sort of are living in a bit of harmony with the boy meerkats. How come they are allowed to be in the same enclosure?
Something that we tried as a bit of an experiment. We'd spoken to others that it had been achieved. There are other institutions. We wanted to have some sort of mixed exhibit in the Kobe Rock. The 2 male meerkats that are in there were excess to requirement. We couldn't keep them with a breeding group. We were a bit worried about social structure there. So we experimented and we put the 2 together and found that it worked very, very well. Neither of them eat each other's food, so they can live in great harmony. Porcupines being primarily nocturnal and the meerkats being diurnal, you quite often don't see them out at exactly the same time.
That's the end of our show for this week. If you'd like any more information on the Certificate in Basic and Animal Care Science, call our team on 0800 SIT to learn. Let's see what's coming up in next week's show.
Next week is our final episode, and we've left some of the best till last. We get all up in a giraffe's personal space. Nikki tells us about the rewarding side of working with animals. We find out about what's really threatening our wildlife. And we meet the real king of the beasts.